So I realized I started doing this thing with DeVonta Smith and Jamar Chase. The debate over which one is wide receiver one. Whenever I see a debate that's favoring one of them, I find myself sticking up for the other. My knee-jerk reaction when someone says that Jamar Chase is clearly wide receiver one, I'm like, well, what more could you have wanted DeVonta Smith to do? He had the best season that we've ever seen from a college wide receiver. He did that for the unbeaten national champs, and he took his game to a whole new level when Jalen Waddle went down. He balled out with two different quarterbacks during the time of his career. I guess you can kind of go back and say three with Jalen Hurts if you want to throw him in there as well, but he was getting like one catch a game, so we don't really count that. He got better and better throughout his college career. His Pro Football Focus grades by year, 2017, he was at 55.2. 2018, he's at 75. 2019, he goes up to 82.7. And then in 2020, he's at 94.9. Some of the Pro Football Focus numbers with DeVonta are just stupid. His quarterbacks had a passer rating of 152.6 when targeting him. He was the highest graded wide receiver from both the left side and the slot. He's got the most receiving yards after contact out of anyone the last 2 years. The big knock on him is that he's 175 pounds, right? Like that's what everybody says. Pro Football Focus basically had him tied with Jamar Chase in catch rate. That's on contested passes, and that's at roughly 49%. That is incredible. That is really, really good. Jamar Chase, by the way, 30 pounds heavier than DeVonta Smith. Sam Munson did this great breakdown on Pro Football Focus where he watched every single target that DeVonta Smith got. Sam also floated out this question on Twitter where he's like, okay, what's Jamar Chase's weakness? I'm not seeing one. And I replied, he doesn't get open when you triple team him. And so yeah, that's kind of meant to be tongue in cheek a little bit, but also not really. Because I literally watched him get triple teamed against Oklahoma and it didn't matter. They bracketed him the entire game and Chase only had 2 catches for 61 yards. So I guess you could say, yeah, it mattered, but everyone else went off in that game. That of course was the game in which Justin Jefferson had 227 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. It was absurd to watch what everybody else was doing with all of their attention focused on Jamar Chase. This is the guy who won the Biletnikoff. He's 19 years old. He just had 2 catches in the biggest game of his life. And you would have thought that he was the one who had the 4 touchdown game. That's how hype he was. To me, I looked at that and I filed that one away. I'm like, that's the guy who I want on my team. That's the guy who takes up so much attention and his teammates can just go off. And then he's also the one after the game who's so fired up that they went off. If we're talking about Jamar Chase at the next level, those things have to matter. Your wide receiver one can't take himself out of the game when he's not getting those targets. I love Amari Cooper, don't get me wrong, but he does that a little bit too much for my liking. I don't worry about Jamar Chase doing that. And that's just the mental side. As Sam Munson said, the physical stuff is just unreal. I've been forcing myself to watch his highlights because we didn't get this past season, and that just still bums me out that we didn't get Jamar Chase in his junior year at LSU. I don't ever want to forget how good Jamar Chase is. Sometimes I'll just turn on those clips of him against Trayvon Diggs in the Alabama game. Mike Renner, Pro Football Focus, he tweets that out all the time. And there are times when I'm saying to myself and trying to play devil's advocate of like, well, what about him taking that year off? Shouldn't we count that against him somewhat? Like, weren't those valuable reps that he didn't get? And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Nick Bosa, he turned out pretty good, and he basically sat out his entire pre-draft season because he got injured in the game against TCU. Jamar Chase didn't even get injured. So I don't really think that that theory holds up too much. I come away from this thinking I love both of these guys, and I'll defend both Jamar Chase and DeVonta Smith. So I say all this, and I'm still sort of scratching my head. Why am I scratching my head? Because it almost never works out like how we think it's going to. If I were a GM, I'd probably flip a coin, and history suggests that there's a really good chance that I'd be wrong. I went back and I looked up every time there were multiple wide receivers drafted in the top 10. That's just in the 21st century. There were 11 such instances of that. The draft in 2011 was the outlier. That, of course, was AJ Green, number 4, Julio Jones, number 6. What's a lot more common is a draft like 2003. Charles Rogers drafted number 2 overall, Andre Johnson drafted number 3. 2004, Larry Fitzgerald drafted number 4 overall, Roy Williams drafted number 7. Even 2014, Sammy Watkins, man, that guy was such a can't miss prospect. Number 4 overall, then Mike Evans goes number 7 overall. And it pains me as a Bears fan to even bring this up, but I will. 2015, Amari Cooper goes number 4, and then Kevin White goes number 7. The bust rate on these guys is so unbelievably high. If you go even the entire first round instead of just the top 10, there's only 3 drafts in the 21st century that had multiple receivers making multiple Pro Bowls. That's multiple receivers who were drafted in the first round. So 2010 that happened, 2011, 2014. By the way, this is going to be the first time in 4 years that any receiver at all is drafted in the top 10. It's almost like general managers kind of picked up on this trend. And yeah, this sort of feels like it's going to be Julio Jones, AJ Green all over again. That's what GMs picking in the top 10, picking a receiver in the top 10 are hoping for. Both those guys went to 7 Pro Bowls. It helped that they basically played with the same quarterbacks too throughout their careers. That could make or break this whole DeVonta versus Ja'Marr argument. What this is already setting up though is something that's pretty obvious. Because both are so highly regarded, we could see one fail, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, we knew that the other one was gonna be better. But it's like, did we know that? Go back to that debate between AJ Green, Julio Jones. AJ Green was the clear-cut wide receiver 1, and then Julio runs that 4.39 40 at the combine, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, is Julio wide receiver 1? AJ Green goes number 4 overall, and then Falcons trade up and they get Julio at number 6. And Green makes 2 All-Pro teams actually before Julio makes his first one. So it was still a debate, even years later. And the latter half of their careers has probably favored Julio, I think we can say that. But still, could that happen again this year with Ja'Marr and DeVonta? Absolutely. Both Ja'Marr Chase and DeVonta Smith, in my opinion, well, I mean, not even in my opinion, it's just fact, they were more productive college players. For all I know, there are GMs that have their brains in a pretzel just like I do. All I know is that it would suck to be the one who gets this wrong. It feels like there shouldn't be a wrong answer. Here's hoping that there isn't a wrong answer, and I could just end up defending both of them for the next 10 years.